He is ruthless, he is tenacious, he is ingenious. He's a media tycoon who created a global empire worth more than $80 billion. News Corp's Rupert Murdoch is a modern-day press baron who rules newspapers and magazines, television networks and cable channels, film studios and satellite systems, often reflecting the message of their provocative and polarizing chairman. His empire started with a small newspaper in Australia and became one of the biggest media companies in the world. With over 150 newspapers, international television operations, and a movie studio, News Corp pulls in yearly revenues of some $32 billion. In 1976, he handed over $30 million for the paper. A few weeks later, in the face of employee opposition, he added the New York Magazine Company for $7.5 million. The purchase included the liberal Village Voice. The Voice returned a handsome profit. 8 years later, Murdoch sold it for $55 million. Murdoch was now on the map in New York. He was featured on the cover of Time magazine in January of 1977 as King Kong towering over the city, grasping its most influential publications. What Rupert wanted soon began to play out in a decade-long spending spree. In 1981, he bought the prestigious Times and the Sunday Times of London. Back in the States, he scooped up the Boston Herald and the Chicago Sun-Times. Murdoch. He wouldn't stop at newspapers.
In 1985, he does the deal to buy 20th Century Fox.
So he took full ownership of the 20th Century Fox film studio, a multi-billion-dollar asset now, for about $500 million.
And his ultimate mark. Murdoch had a master plan. He paid Metromedia's John Kluge up to $2 billion to buy television stations in 6 major markets. They formed the nucleus of what would become Fox Television Network.
There was ABC, NBC, CBS, and there was no room on the dial for another network. Well, suddenly Rupert comes along and he's...
In 1988, he shelled out $3 billion to acquire the Annenberg magazine empire that included 17, The Racing Form, and TV Guide. Murdoch's shocking price was the highest ever paid for a publishing company. But that same year, he was tripped up by federal regulations prohibiting ownership of a newspaper and a television station in a single market. As a result, Murdoch was temporarily forced to sell his beloved New York Post. He was able to buy it back years later for $25 million after obtaining a special waiver. Undiminished, Murdoch reached for the sky, literally. His next big gamble was on satellite television. In 1990, Sky merged with British Satellite Broadcasting to form B-Sky-B. Murdoch maintained 39% of the company, but the return on his investment was in a downward spiral. Still, in 1993, he was back at the poker table. He forked over $1 billion for the Chinese television network Star TV. Murdoch made a speech in London that inflamed the Chinese government.
Advances in the technology of telecommunications have proved an unambiguous threat to totalitarian regimes everywhere.
The Chinese retaliated by banning private ownership of satellite dishes, and with them, Murdoch's access to millions of Chinese homes. Star TV was under siege. Murdoch had to placate the Chinese government, so he removed from Star a frequent source of their anger, the BBC. He also killed an unflattering book about China written by the former governor of Hong Kong. Chinese leadership soon after expressed admiration for the gestures, and Murdoch would continue from then on to court Chinese officials to expand News Corp's often tense presence in China. In 2003, at age 72, Rupert Murdoch went after yet another glorious television prize, DirecTV. His $6.6 billion offer gave him a 34% stake. After reclaiming his stock, Murdoch moved on with a 2005 purchase of the social networking site MySpace. Once again, he moved swiftly and paid a huge price to beat out a rival, this time Viacom's Sumner Redstone. The effort was considered a disaster. Facebook left MySpace in the dust. Before long, Murdoch returned to his natural element, refocusing his eyes on one of the most prestigious and treasured newspapers in the world. On August 1st, 2007, Dow Jones entered into an agreement with News Corp that handed Murdoch the Wall Street Journal. But Murdoch surprised many of his critics. Eventually, the Wall Street Journal surpassed USA Today to become the #1 daily paper in America. Media reports disclosed allegations that the Murdoch-owned tabloid News of the World tapped the voicemails of a teenage murder victim and her family and paid police for information. To contain the scandal, the 168-year-old News of the World was shut down in July 2011. Murdoch apologized to a British parliamentary committee. Knocked down but not out, Murdoch launched Fox Sports Network to compete with ESPN. And to placate shareholders, in June 2013, Murdoch split his 6-decade-old publishing business from the rest of his media empire.